How's it going, everyone? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 3. The last episode, we had more preparations for Keiichi's murder, if he's actually going to go through with that. I'm very shocked still that he's even considering it and going through with some of the preparations. I don't know if it will happen, and I kind of don't want it to happen, but I have a feeling it's probably going to happen. Like, Chapter 3 has to do something that the previous chapters have not, and I feel like this is that one thing. Right now, we're in a little bit of a flashback. I don't know how much more there is to looking back on Keiichi's past, but this is when Keiichi arrived to Hinamizawa. We learn that he is a smart kid, but only when things have a real-world purpose. And I kind of like looking back at our main character for once. It's different. We have not really looked at his past, at all. So, this is absolutely welcome. The first day after transferring here, I went to the classroom with the teacher. I thought it would seem pitiful for her to bring me in there, so I placed my hand on the door before she could, slammed it open, and set foot into the room. The thrilling, powerful way I opened that door was none other than my own determination to try doing my life over again. And then within seconds, that determination took a hard counter to the face. A blackboard eraser fell on me. Plus, there was a huge rock inside. It was a supremely painful trap someone had set up. Oh, come on. Sotoko was already beating me right from the first day I transferred. And that frightened me. I was bewildered. The class was surprised too. I wasn't just surprised that the students in the class were all in different grades and were different genders. It was because the room felt completely different from the schools I knew. And as I spent more time with them, my surprise continued to grow. This fresh sense of surprise had never left my life even to this day. Every day was a fresh new surprise. I've never had a single boring day since coming here. The days were lively, spent with the other club members. We played Old Maid with cards with scratches on the back to cheat. We let all our passions go wild during our games. We went all out as regular participants in tournaments at the toy store, not Toy Story, that's something different, in town, and many, many more things. And this did happen. Recently, during those times, there was the bento competition. It was that's when I saw an unexpected side to Sotoko. Thinking back on it, I only ate dinner with her 2 nights. It was such a sweet, gentle time spent, and it warmed my heart remembering it even now. I realized that Sotoko was pretending to be stubborn and firm, and how brave she was, part of her heart, always waiting for her Nini to come home. And I vowed to become her Nini. Sotoko may have been nagging and overly critical, but she knew how to take care of someone. But though it might have seemed like she was taking the lead, it was actually her way of depending upon another person. Even if Satoshi and Sotoko's lives as siblings were confined by their uncle and his wife, they were still warm, sunny days. When did those sunny days all go wrong? What mistake was made? Laminating tragedies of the past would do no good, and I told myself so many times, but I did anyway. Keiichi, isn't that why you chose your own path, to take back that life? Nobody ordered you to do this. You decided it on your own. You don't desire anyone's praise for this. You thought it all through yourself. You'll carve it out yourself, and you'll do it now. This wasn't a path I could see very far down, not like the road parents or society could offer. It was a narrow path, dark and utterly distressing, one for which the next step would always be shrouded in darkness. But that disheartening path would keep on going forever. It was an unlimited path, and there was nowhere I couldn't travel. The kind of path only available to those to imagine where they wanted to go. Don't be ashamed at breaking from the brightly lit paved road. In fact, feel proud that you found your very own path to walk. and I hadn't discarded the paved road either. Once I achieved my goal, I would go back to that bright road, and then I'd spend those average sunny days at my leisure. Oh yeah, remember, we're also planning a murder. When I next realized it, the hole had grown so deep I couldn't believe it. Did I dig all this myself? I put my shovel into the bottom of the hole. I would drag the body here, throw it into the hole, and cover it up with dirt. Even if it took me time to camouflage it by putting plants on top, it would all go much more easily than digging this hole had. I glanced at my watch. It was almost evening, and I hadn't realized it. I may not have felt the time passing, but digging a hole this deep must have taken quite a lot of time. I took a seat on a slanted rock nearby and wiped the sweat from my brow. Now, once it got a little darker, I'd go get the metal bat I hid in the schoolyard. Then I'd make the call to lure him out. And then I'd do it. The number of things I needed to do to reach that moment were dwindling. I felt that moment closing in on me much more keenly than I did the passage of time. I didn't have any hesitation, but I still felt that contradiction. At every step in this process, I had a few chances to hesitate, to turn back, to let myself lose my nerve. Having to endure those million temptations and wait for when the time was right was an indescribably slow and painful torture. I had thought myself acting all weak because of that, but I stopped midway through. This was okay. It was fine. I could detest the abnormal act of homicide as much as I wanted, and it didn't matter. I wasn't going to be a cutthroat killer after today. I would pass through this strange day and go back to the world I was in before. If I fell to the level of a psychopath who thought nothing of killing, I wouldn't be able to go back to my old life. So this was fine with me. I didn't have to feel ashamed at hesitating to kill, because I was human. It was funny to me that I'd be the bearer of Oyashiro-sama's curse at the same time I was aware I was human. I exhaled lightly and stood. I concealed my presence and sharpened my senses in all directions to search for anyone around but me. Okay, let's go. One step at a time. I would walk my own path, a path no one had forced me to walk. The cicadas made an annoying fuss, their chorus covered by the suspicious noise of me breaking twigs underfoot. And their chorus filled the path far ahead of me, letting me know I would be alone for some time. The cicadas blessed the path I walked, encouraging me with every last ounce of the strength they had. The sky was far above. In not even an hour, the veil of night would draw near and the sky would be tinted with dusk. By that time, the Higurashi would let me hear their chorus in place of the cicadas. When that happened, would everything be over with? Would everything have ended? I said something along those lines when I left Sotoko's fate up to a public agency. But this time was different. I would do it. I would carry it out. I would end it. Whoa. Alrighty, we had a little slideshow there. And I'm not reading anything that's being typed out here, because I'm not the one that's in control right now. When the Higurashi cried, get it? Get it, guys? Get it? Because that's the title of the... That's the title of the game. When they cry is when shit goes down. When they cry is when I bust. When they cry is when I cry. Okay, wait. Oh, wait, no, stop. Other way. Whew, okay. So, but this time was different. I would do it. It would all be over very soon. Everything would end. Yes, when the Higurashi cried. Okay. Now I'm caught up. I forget. Mouse wheel forward is to bring this up. There is nobody at school. I couldn't hear the playful voices of children. This was the first time I'd seen the school with such a lack of human presence. Still, I quieted my breath and looked around, not wanting to be unprepared. It had gotten darker outside, but it was almost like my eyes could see more clearly now. I made absolutely sure of my safety and then walked to the heavy construction machine I'd hidden the metal bat behind. I had a tinge of worry, a premonition that someone had found the bat and hidden it somewhere else as a prank. If that happened, would I take that as an opportunity to desist? If it really wasn't there, then the sensation of chilled metal. It was still here where I left it. It hadn't run away. Satoshi hadn't run away. He'd waited here patiently for me.
待たせたな、サトシ。いよいよだが、覚悟はいいか?
Through the metallic touch, Satoshi grins at me in my mind. That's what I should be asking, you know? I did this last year already. You should be more worried about yourself.
上等だぜ、サトシ。目に物を見せてやろうぜ。
Satoshi's bat got lighter and lighter and fit into my hands like it was being absorbed. It didn't feel wrong to swing this. I could move it around so naturally, it was like an extension of my own right arm. Of course it felt like that. Satoshi and I were holding one bat together. Next, I would make the call to lure the man out. It wasn't a bad time for it. My friends were doubtlessly parading happily through the stalls. I hadn't considered where to make the call from. My house and Sotoko's, were pretty far apart. If I called from my house, I wouldn't make it. Couldn't I use the school phone? But as I thought, the room was locked up and I couldn't get in. Shit. I'm so naive. You should have at least figured this part out. I couldn't call him, and just for that was today all over. I'm sorry, Satoshi. And just as I cursed my own naivete, a miracle occurred. A bicycle came into the schoolyard. It was a familiar middle-aged man, the one from the Forest Service field office. Why? Wasn't today Sunday? Was he here to pick up something he forgot? Anyway, the forest officer went around back and felt around in his pocket and then unlocked the door and entered. The best possible coincidence, and it had to be Satoshi who saved me. The metal bat, through just my contact with it, told me that this was a chance I couldn't allow to slip by. The sections for the forest office and the school were neatly separated. I felt the man head into the forest office's storehouse, which was so far in the back, students weren't allowed in. The door didn't match its fittings well, so it didn't close all the way, and the gap in the door opened slowly as if to lure me in. I took a deep breath and went in. I tiptoed along, silently and stealthily, and made it to the teacher's lounge. That was the only place with a phone. As I held my breath in the teacher's lounge, I heard the Forest Service officer walking back over. Then the back door clattered shut and was locked. I glanced out the window at the schoolyard and watched as the man got on his bike like nothing had happened and rode out the school gate. The school gate once again emptied, becoming deathly silent. I waited for a bit to make sure the silence was the real deal and then reached for the telephone on the principal's desk. I fished Sotoko's house phone number out of my pocket. Yes, the number in the class directory for Sotoko had been the one from their house now, where she lived with her uncle. I touched the dial with my fingers and then thought for a moment about what to say exactly when he picked up. Despite how many times I'd gone over it in my head last night, now that I had my finger on the dial like this, it started to seep out of my mind like a cracked bucket leaking water. Simple would be best. More importantly, to say it straight and not sound suspicious. I counted off 3 heartbeats and then spun the dial. Oh, I'm sure this is gonna work out lovely. And by the way, the drink for this session is indeed on-brand Gatorade, which the cool kids call Gatorade. The call sound would Sotoko's uncle pick up? Now of all times, the hope that he wouldn't pick up and the feeling of doom and the knowledge that I couldn't save Sotoko if he didn't whirled around in a vortex. There he is. It was the voice of a grumpy man like he had just woken up. He picked up. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this drink in. It's so much talking and it's so hot. Say your name so I know you're Hojo, you asshole. It would be terrible if I got it wrong. I made up my mind. I had all the initiative on my side. Here we go.
こちらは下根市沖宮警察です。北条さんのお宅ですか?
Okay, Okay, I'm done drinking. I don't get a lot of opportunities. There we go. I was changing my voice, but did he really think I sounded like an adult? Would he believe I was the police?
はい、北条ですけど。
今、お宅のお嬢さんの北条聡子さんをこちらで保護しています。
え、聡子があいつ何かやらかしおりましたか？
He fell for it. I could tell by how tense he was. He didn't doubt my words.
詳しい事情はこちらにいらしてからご説明します。すぐにこちらへ来ていただくことはできますか？
今ですか？風呂に入っちゃったからあんまし表に出たかないんですがね。
What? You don't want to come because you've already taken a bath.
はい、今すぐです。
すぐ。ったく。聡子のやつ何をしちゃったんですか？
詳しい話はこちらでいたします。ではお待ちしていますのでよろしくお願いします。
ちょっと俺警察署がどこかわかんないんだけど、どこよ場所？
You moron, what the hell? The Okonomiya police station? I don't know where it is either. Aren't you from around here? Why don't you know that? A greasy sweat came over my body. Eventually, just as I was about to choke, he spoke.
消防署の隣でしたっけ？遠いな。
Thank goodness he remembered on his own for me. I didn't care where the police station was, so long as he left his house to get there.
ではお待ちしていますので。
俺警察行ったら誰んとこ訪ねればいいんよ。あんた名前は？
On top of that, you wanted to know my name. Just leave your goddamn house already.
前橋と申します。では失礼します。
That was close. I almost thoughtlessly told him my real name. I managed to change the last syllable of it, but I put the receiver down like I was running away. Yeah, don't we have to like rush off to commit murder? My fingers were trembling and I was soaked with a tepid sweat. I wasn't just nervous about the phone call. With that call, everything had finally been put into motion. I left the school. It was locked before, but it was easy enough to open from the inside. But I couldn't lock it again after I left. In terms of being thorough, I wanted to lock it, but I couldn't waste time going back to the teacher's lounge and looking for a key. I needed to rush back as fast as I could and ambush him. I zoomed back to the scene on my bike. If Sotoko's uncle got out of town before I got there, everything would be over. He'd learned that there was no one at the station named Maibashi, and things would get pretty messed up. As I returned at full speed, I passed a family wearing yukadas, sorry. Yakuza is a little different. They must have been on their way to the festival. Many people in Hinamizawa knew my face, though I didn't know theirs. Even just passing by them like this made me uneasy. But I didn't generally come around here, so those living in the area might not have known much about me. That didn't matter right now. I needed to get back as fast as possible to control my breathing and to ambush the man. I hid my bike in a thicket and picked up Satoshi's bat, which I just left hidden in the shade. You know, it's not dark. Like, I don't think that this is gonna work out really well. And then I held my breath, waiting to see someone. I wondered if he still hadn't gotten here. Or maybe he went right out after the phone call and passed by here already. I couldn't figure out which it was, and was set upon by an indescribable impatience. Calm down, Keiichi Maibara. Even if he came here already, he'd pass by here on the way back, right? The end result would be the same. It wouldn't change the fact that he'd die. He'd probably be coming on his motorcycle. How would I stop him then? I figured it would be best not to think too hard and just to hit him as he passed or beat him out of his seat. The path was made of pebbles. If I hit him as hard as I could and made him lose his balance, he wouldn't be able to help falling. Oh my god. I'm actually getting a little anxious here. Like, okay, I just want to clear something up as what I said from earlier. I don't want to see Keiichi commit murder. I don't think that this is the correct option to make here. Like, seriously, he, and I will continue to make this argument, is acting like a psychopath, or thinking like a psychopath, or about to commit an action that a psychopath would make. And not to say that all murderers are psychopaths, but to think that it's okay to do this is what I'm thinking is making him out to be a psychopath. I don't want him to go through with this, but after everything that has happened so far, I can't help but think that Keiichi has kind of lost his shit here. Okay, let's see what happens. And then, the chorus of the Higurashi stopped. The sound of a bike approached from far away. I couldn't tell what sort of motorcycle it was from its sound, but I'd seen it parked before, so I'd know. It was getting rapidly closer. It was almost here. If he just went a little farther, he'd cross into that thicket and appear in front of me. I'd taken a moment to make sure it was him, then when I had, I'd put my plan into action. 1,500 seconds, boys. 1,500 seconds to murder this man. 1,500 seconds to bury him in the ground. 1,500 seconds to give birth. And 1,500 seconds for me to bust. The motorcycle appeared. A few easily identifiable characteristics told me it was Sotoko's uncle's bike, without a doubt. But was it really him? Was it really Sotoko's uncle? I wasn't making a mistake, was I? I looked at its characteristics again. Its color, shape, and most of all the man's clothes, and face. Those last feelings of hesitation, I did away with them. Sotoko, now, your Nini will end it, okay? Closer, closer, the bike came closer. Let's go. Satoshi! Hey, what the fuck? Whoosh. I jumped out of the thicket. I used my shoulder to basically tackle the uncle on the bike with all my might. Okay, well, it's him. I mean, his name's there, which means, it's obviously him. That's basically our method of identification. He gave a dumb shout as his bike completely lost its balance. Finally, it fell, the bike scattering clouds of sand, and after spinning, it stopped. Her uncle, tossed to the ground, didn't answer to what had just happened and groaned for a few moments, crouched on the ground. My breathing started to become Oh, that wasn't laughing? Oh, I thought that was laughing, bro. Now I'm seeming like the psychopath. No, I couldn't have this emotion. Some weird secretion crossed through my brain and nearly made me hallucinate. Her uncle was groaning. Now was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What was I doing? All the sounds in the world cut off. My mental chaos from a moment ago withdrew like a lie, and I could feel the temperature in my head rapidly cooling down. The tension in my muscles all went away like the strings they'd been attached to had been cut, and I let my hands dangle at my sides. It wasn't quite like exhaustion. Have you calmed down now? Keiichi, Maibara? Do you need to remember again why things got to this point today? Scrape, scrape. I stepped over the pebbled path, taking one step, another step, and then another towards Sotoko's uncle. The more I walked, the more my breathing calmed. The more I walked, the more I felt my body cooling, calming, chilling with frost. Yes. At this moment, this guy had lost permission to live. I had just rescinded it. So he mustn't stay in this world any longer. If he lived any longer, if Sotoko's misfortune continued, it would be my responsibility for having allowed him to live. I could feel the cooling substance going through my whole body, even down to my capillaries. Her uncle was at my feet now, still on the ground like an idiot. I smiled coldly at how ridiculous he looked. And that's all it took for it to hurt? Sotoko's heart hurt much more. And now you're going to feel that. And with your life, I'll make up for her pain. I erased all unnecessary information from my mind. I prioritized the murder of this man. Execute, execute, execute. Order 66, this motherfucker. Utterly calmly, I delivered my first strike to the back of his head. I wanted to get at the most effective spot. At least during that first moment, I'd have to attack him while he was at his most defenseless. As if he was hit in the head, he'd covered his head. Well, yeah. It was a defensive reaction all humans made like machines. He used both hands to cover his head, so he couldn't pick himself up off the heap he was in on the ground. Like pounding a caterpillar into the dirt, I hit him over and over. He covered his head, I'd hit him in the side. If he covered his body, I'd go for his head. If he rolled over, I'd strike his feet, his knees, his elbows. I didn't care where anymore. By just delivering one blow after another, I induced panic in him. I retained my overwhelming advantage, but I hadn't done nearly enough to deliver a fatal wound. Her uncle skillfully pulled himself up off the ground and started to run like a fleeing rabbit. It wasn't a judgment he'd made after seeing my face and deciding whether to fight me. Right now he was fleeing by instinct, just trying to escape from the threat that had presented itself. A counterattack from the more physically capable uncle was what I was most concerned about. He may have run, but it wasn't all that unlucky, and the odds were in my favor. The uncle didn't run away towards people, but off the path and into the woods. How pleasant that he would run in a direction where nobody else was. He was fleeing into strange geography like a rat that instinctively runs into tight spots over and over. Yes, he was no longer human. He was a rat. The blood vessels in my legs expanded and my total oxygen supply increased. I lowered myself to gain the most explosive velocity I could. Without breathing, I became a wind-like shadow and dashed. I crossed thickets, crushed dead tree branches underfoot, and dove through the woods like a bullet. He ran so cowardly, arms flailing as he went. After catching up to him, I didn't need so much as a blink of an eye to strike him again. My senses, mind, and body were all sharpened purely to kill this man. This was the first time I'd felt like this. Well, this was the first experience I'd ever have killing someone. It felt natural continuing to do this for the first time. And that meant I had this much talent for killing. Or perhaps the act of killing was so simple that anyone could do it. I didn't struggle or grow tired at all chasing the clumsily fleeing uncle. No matter how much he ran, it was like trying to get away from his own shadow. He couldn't get away from me. I could easily aim at his back, his shoulder, and his head even from this unnatural stance. Each time I struck him, he wailed in pain and begged pitifully for forgiveness, but it didn't disturb my mind. I was neither excited nor plagued by hesitation like before. I felt sharp. I felt like a carnivore. And of course, so did the uncle, who was trying to run away because he didn't want to die. He didn't want to be eaten, like a herbivore running with all its might trying to get away. Well, I just finished B-Stars, so that's what this is reminding me of. Despite all the attacks, despite all the hits, he kept on fleeing without even staggering. And despite the bad footing in the forest, he impressively never tripped over anything. But there was no need to admire that fact. It was simply proof that he was no more than an animal. If he was chased, he would run. If he was going to be killed, he would run. He bared his fangs at the weak, but couldn't oppose the strong whatsoever. He was lowly, vulgar, a diminutive animal. Such a puny little creature had harmed Sotoko. Scar after scar to her body and mind, deep wounds that might not ever go away as long as she lived. Oh. My cold and calm emotions suddenly turned into bestial ones. My personality changed into something specialized for murder, purely to devour the diminutive animal before me. The uncle gave a puny little shriek, covered his head, and ran. I'm impressed by how much you can run. Fine, run as much as you like. I will be your death. I will choose the moment at my leisure. Your legs will hurt, your lungs will feel about to burst, your head will hurt from lack of oxygen. If you feel the pain has become worse than death, then by all means stop any time. Without turning back, suffocating on this terror of the approaching death, he just ran shamefully onward. He ran but was chased, his head bashed with the metal bat, sweat and drool flying everywhere, blood clinging to him. From his mouth came the sounds of coarse, irregular breathing and high-pitched screaming that verged on crying, and pleas for forgiveness to someone I didn't know who. Each and every second was a second of atonement that I granted him. Now run, 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 run. Then fall and moan and die. Where did you even crawl out of anyway? You were never here before. If you were never here, you never should have showed up. If you never showed up, our lives would still be fun and enjoyable. We would have gone to today's festival, waited for each other, and gone to the shrine laughing. We would have been playing amongst the stalls right about now. We'd be browsing the strange food stalls you only saw at festivals, trying to get prizes from goldfish scooping, ring throwing, or target practice. Mion would surely make it into a competition, and we as a club would have a grand time. And everyone would have been cheering for Rika-chan's dedication dance, and everyone would say how fun it was, and how it would give us energy for days to come. Fun, enjoyable, and funny, warm times spent with friends. And that would have happened, but it didn't, and now it was all smashed to pieces. There was no doubt that would be what the world was like if you never showed up. You were the obstacle, the mistake, the heresy in that world. But I would correct that mistake now. I would erase you, and make it so this last week never happened. Tonight was the Watanagashi Festival, the holy night where taking just one life was permitted in the name of Yashiro-sama's curse. It looks like the Higurashi stopped crying at some point. When the Higurashi cried, everything would end. And the Higurashi silenced. Lowly one, the hour of atonement is at end. The Higurashi have stopped their crying, thus it is the end. The end, the end, the end. End. You don't have to run away anymore. Die with those dirty brains of yours smashed everywhere. Yeah. Get his ass. Lightning and thunder struck like an explosion. It was so loud it shook the ground and I smelled gunpowder. The response I got this time was clearly different from the one before. The metal bat crunched into the crown of his head. It was like the top of his head had caved in. The bat felt like it was biting him. So he's dead. We bashed his brain in. Or his skull in, or whatever. It had been the final killing attack that visited him. When I didn't overlook the opening, he left as his knees gave out under him. I remained alert for a few moments, and then he planted both knees into the ground, and then fell forwards, burying his head into the ground. I'd been holding back my ragged breathing, but now it all came out of me like a dam bursting. My head was dizzy and light and unable to maintain my balance. I leaned against a nearby tree. The uncle didn't try and guard his head any longer. After a disgusting sort of spasm, he stopped moving. Did I get him? Did I get him for sure? I fought back my exhausted urge to fall over where I stood and drew towards him carefully, bat still at the ready. It was possible he was faking it and trying to wait it out. Should I check for a pulse? I realized right away, though, how unnecessary that would be. If I thought he might be faking it, then I would have to just keep pummeling him until I was satisfied. I fought back my ragged breathing again, and then I swung my bat far above and brought it down. His body leaped like a bow, and he didn't try to cover his head. Then once again I aimed for his head and swung. His reaction was the same this time. Bro, he's dead. Stop. After spending a few moments making his head into mochi, The hits gradually started to feel different, and it started to spray a filthy dark red liquid everywhere. That was enough. It was definite now. I had absolutely killed him. There was no sense of accomplishment, nor one of regret. I didn't feel anger towards Sotoko's uncle, nor pity towards Sotoko herself. Instead, right now, I was feeling like my heart had been stolen by the downpour. It had begun to rain at some point, and how comfortable it felt. The rainwater drenched my body and dripped down to the ground. The excitement within me faded as the rain washed away the grime. In exchange, my shoes were so wet they made splashing sounds. And despite abusing Satoshi's bat like that, it wasn't bent very much. There were a few dents in it, probably from hitting the man, but nothing that would make it seem different from before. Instead, it had been stained with black and red with mud and blood. But that itself would be evidence. The one piece of evidence needed to prove that my delusions hadn't just been daydreams, and that I'd ended Sotoko's uncle for all eternity. Alright, Keiichi, calm your mind. The time for passion is over. Now is the time to be cold as ice. I needed to bury the body, but where was I? I'd simply followed the man as far as he ran into the darkness. I couldn't take a guess as to how far we'd run. It was already pitch black around us, and the only light I had to go on was the very faint lights on the road a little further down. It was so dark out, I hadn't noticed the darkness until just now. My vision was so good I could see the man's ugly hairline. I could have counted the pores in his head. It was only now that I realized how much crazy strength I had mustered at that moment. I went over to the streetlight. I looked up and down the road, desperately trying to figure out where I was. Oh no. This was the one road connecting Hinamizawa to town. We were unbelievably far away from Sotoko's house. Had the two of us really run so far a distance? My surprise at that was accompanied by knowledge of the miraculous fact that despite running so far and making so much noise, we hadn't come across anybody at all. There was a long way between here and the ambush location where I dug the hole. There was no way I could carry the body that far. Wait, aside from that, the bike the man took here was still lying in the middle of that path. That would be an issue. The police could tell whose motorcycle it was by looking at its license plate. And they wouldn't just leave it at that. Thankfully, the corpse was in a dark forest. In terms of urgency, dealing with the bike would come first. And I wanted to get the shovel back from where I'd left it next to the hole. I shouldn't drag the body there. I would have to deal with it right here. Fortunately, the ground was like mud from the downpour and was more sludgy here than where I was before. I might be able to dig a grave quickly here. Of course, my bicycle was still over where I'd left it too. It still wasn't over. Homicide had only been half of my goal. The other half would be just as important as the first. I would completely hide the body, not allowing a beginning to happen. I would erase the man like he had never existed and regain the peaceful times we had before. I bent my head backwards and calmed my mind even further. The big water droplets struck my brow mercilessly. They were actually quite comfortable, and for a while I let my desire have its way. After confirming that I was sharp again, I started running through the rain. The motorcycle was in the grass at the roadside. Considering how it looked, pelted with rain and covered in mud, it actually seemed like it had been lying there for a very long time. The plan was to drop the motorcycle into the swamp. The swamp was a bit of a walk from here. I lifted the bike up. I didn't think it would be so heavy. I was a little surprised. But once I had it upright, it was fairly easy to roll it along. Still, pushing this thing all the way to the swamp was really not something I wanted to do. I could no longer ignore my exhaustion and warned me numerous times of how far the swamp was, and it warned me. This motorcycle, I wonder if I could ride it well enough. Once I got it going, it would basically be the same as a bicycle. Wouldn't it get me to the swamp quickly? A plan suggested by my exhaustion, the anxiety at getting on a motorcycle for the first time withdrew. I turned the key and then you just kick this pedal, right? Yeah. There we go. It's on. And then I gripped the handlebars. First the right and then the left. Maybe I twisted them too much. The bike lurched and did a wheelie like an angry horse. I lost it for a second, but it was just a problem of how much torque to apply. Let's try that again. This time slowly, gently. And that time it went well. It was strange to be on a two-wheeled vehicle that would go even if I didn't pedal. Very odd, but I got used to it quickly. Mion once told me you could get a scooter license within a day, and she was clearly right. This was pretty easy. I needed to throw the metal bat into the swamp too, but I didn't know how I would pack the bat onto the motorcycle. Without much other choice, I stuffed it into the back of my shirt, feeling like a ninja carrying a katana. If I put the tip down the seat in my pants and hunched over, it wouldn't fall out. I got back on the bike, and this time got going without any difficulty. I carefully pressed the button labeled light, and a rather strong light came on, illuminating the way forward. I probably really shouldn't have turned it on, but I didn't have any way of seeing at this point, and had zero confidence I could ride through this darkness. As the rain came down on me, I maintained a precarious balance and inched my way towards the swamp. Along the way, I ran into a few people who seemed to be returning from the festival, but none of them had any interest in me. They were either all soaked through with the rain, and hurrying on their ways home, or had their umbrellas low and their heads down. Yesterday, I might have been wary of even these passersby, but right now it didn't seem to be much cause for concern. In fact, it would probably be less suspicious to be riding out in the open like this instead of sneaking around. More and more, though, I started to think of that idea as naive, brought on by my exhausted state. I climbed a steep hill. On a bike, the hill would have put me out of my breath. But I just had to accelerate a little bit to climb the entire thing. Motorcycles sure are convenient. For a moment, its lights illuminated a sign before I passed it. Onigafuchi Swamp / Good Children Do Not Play Around Here. Still, it wasn't like the way to the swamp was cordoned off by a metal fence or anything. Parents and teachers would get mad at you if they found that you were playing at the swamp. But some of the bad kids in my class apparently snuck out there sometimes to see the giant crayfish in this place. They talked about it before, how they'd go to the candy shop and buy some pickled squid and then just tie it into a fishing line and throw it. And all the crayfish would come running. Once I got up to the bank, there was a tiny ritual shrine and traditional ropes on one of the trees. Holy shit, it's real! And as if swallowed by the downpour whole, the blackened swamp had waited for me. If I slammed on the accelerator from the cliff-like stop like I was on now, the thing would fly straight into the middle of the swamp. I had to be careful not to fall in with it. If I drowned and disappeared, man, what a stupid ghost story that would be. On the night of Watanagashi, Sotoko's uncle's corpse was found in a thicket by the road leading to town, and Keiichi Maibara went missing. People would whisper that I'd been demoned away. The 5th year's curse would be a half-baked one. I got off the bike and twisted the accelerator as hard as I could. I let go just when it seemed like it would drag me forward. The bike shot off the cliff and was swallowed down into the swamp, leaving a far fainter splash than I'd imagined. Its surface was being pummeled by the downpour, and the muddy, filthy water was flowing into it. I couldn't even make out the motorbike I'd just thrown in there. It was pretty heavy after all. It would be quickly engulfed by the soft mud at the bottom of the swamp, and it would be pulled deeper and deeper until it reached hell itself. I felt no reluctance whatsoever in throwing the man's motorbike down into the land of the demons. But I did have a tinge of regret about Satoshi's bat. I washed the bat with muddy water and got the gore sticking to it, came off easily. I had sort of shared today's events with Satoshi, so I wanted to give a quiet place to stay. And that's how I felt. I started to feel more like returning it to the locker from before so it can continue to keep watch over Sotoko.
Satoshi, 俺、多分お前のこと誤解してた。
Yeah, I mean, apparently he was a bat all along. Satoshi listened quietly, without nodding. I am absolutely convinced now. You were the one who beat your aunt to death last year and saved Soroko. I always scorned you and called you a coward who ran away, but I was wrong. To the rest of the world, some deviant was behind that incident, but I know that was something you did for her, and then you disappeared. You finally got back that piece and lost it within days. So I swear to you that I will live life to the fullest from now on, live it enough for the both of us. I will live on as though this week, this day had never happened. But I will never forget this short time we shared together for as long as I live. I didn't know what expression Satoshi made as he listened, but as someone who had protested the same girl, I felt he had smiled and given me his blessing. And then, my hand moved on its own accord, and the bat I had hesitated to throw away left my hands and flew through the air. It traveled its parabolic path, spinning all the while, and the swamp absorbed it without a sound. There wasn't even any ripples when it hit the surface. That surface was tempestuous because of the downpour, and the bat was long gone. For a moment I regretted having thrown it, but I realized that might have been what Satoshi had wanted.
そうだよな。俺はまだ感傷に浸る余裕なんかないんだよな。
Thank God. A moment to drink. I've been waiting for this moment forever. I would return from my shovel, get on my bike, dig a hole to hide the body, and bury it. But how do we know where it's at? It seemed like a simple sequence of events, but I felt extremely exhausted that I had to do it all tonight. Satoshi left me with only the advice I needed to finish this up soon, and then fell silent for eternity and disappeared at the bottom of the demon's abyss. God damn. Really all I can say to that one. Alright, we're gonna end the episode here. I really don't want to, but I'm really tired. With all this speaking that I'm having to do, it's a lot for me. Speaking is a very difficult activity after some time. But thank you all for watching this episode. I can't believe he actually went out and did it. I cannot believe it. Excuse me, and I can't believe he did it with such ease. I don't know if ease is the right word. I mean, I feel like there's going to be some shortcomings. I don't even know if he has a good alibi set up, because he didn't know what to say when Mion asked him what he'd be planning to do. So what's his alibi now? He wasn't at the festival, yet that's what he told his parents. And now he has to go find the body, dig a new hole, which is going to take time. Sure, it's in the middle of the forest, and then he's going to have to get his bike and get out of here. But what are people going to ask him, you know? And what is he going to say? I don't know. I feel like there might be some shortcomings with all this. I guess we'll have to see. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this really, really wild episode. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.